Hey, girl.
Hey, hey, hey. All right. Listen.
If you've got a question, the voices of resin I hear. Oh, PlastChicks.
PlastChicks is an SP-sponsored podcast.
How's
Hello.
it going?
Well, don't you look festive in your shirt?
Well, I thought I'd go sleeveless since, you are not wearing a tracksuit today, as I have been wearing for the past, I don't know, since I got it.
Well, it's probably for the best that that's taking a break real quick.
Right? Time to do some laundry, maybe. How about that?
I don't know. Maybe
I'm just trying to live a more sustainable lifestyle,
Well, there you go. I appreciate that about you sometimes.
So I am Mercedes Landazuri.
And I'm Lynzie Neville.
And with our forces combined, we are
PlastChicks,
the voices of resin.
That's us.
Yeah. So I am design application lead for Techmer PM.
And I am project engineer for Tech Tank in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. We both serve on many boards. We figured, 10 different chapters between the two of us?
Yeah, we're safe for
Yeah, we might do a little takeover. But yeah, so a little over a year ago, we started this podcast, and we would record episodes at some of our favorite conferences in person. And now we are often hosting our interviews at virtual conferences during the lunchtime session. So just a fun way to break it up. You can listen to recordings of our podcast and these interviews the first Friday of every month. SPE releases them. Yep. So you can search PlastChicks, one word, wherever you find your podcast.
No I in between. Common misconception.
But we're fine if you want to pronounce it that way.
We're fine if you want to throw the I in there. We won't be hurt. All right. Well, let's introduce our awesome guest today.
Who is not from Sunoco, as Jeremy said. Jeremy said Sunoco.
Well, you know what, Jeremy? Close enough. So today our guest is, well, I'm going to say your name wrong. Kanistras?
Kanistras. Yeah.
Well, I didn't get to meet Will beforehand. So you know what? You can say my name wrong if you'd like, Will. I'm okay.
Very Greek. It's one of those difficult ones.
So Will is joining us not from Sunoco. Will, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
My name's Will. I'm the production manager at Sonoma Pacific. Oh. Can you hear me? My mic's on.
Yep. I can hear you.
I cannot.
Oh, cool.
This is going to be a fun one.
This will be a great podcast episode.
Wow. Okay. Well,
my mic's on.
I'm not going to be able to hear anything.
Can everyone else hear? Presumably?
I'll just let you lead, Lynzie.
Oh, good. Good.
Okay. My name's Will Kanistras. I'm from Sonoma Pacific Distribution. We are a cannabis manufacturer and distributor. My background is from culinary and hospitality side to about 12 years ago, switching into cannabis, legal cannabis. I've always been a cannabis fan, going back to using it medicinally as a teenager for rheumatoid arthritis, and then moving into California from the East Coast to pursue my food passions. I found that I was frequenting dispensaries and really not finding what I wanted in the current product offerings. It was really different back then, not as regulated. So I decided to start my own brand, Green Thumb Gourmet, focusing on higher end edibles with a medicinal focus. And over the course of the industry switching from medicinal to recreational, I've kind of worked through several different parts, including cultivation and kind of moving into manufacturing and production over the last 5 or 6 years. So I definitely specialize mostly in the production end, and that has to do a lot with pre-rolls, concentrates, and other produced products such as like topicals, bath and body care products, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, and Mercedes, I mean, you can feel free to ask questions even though you can't hear Will, because I'm getting a lot of feedback that everyone else can hear him, just not you.
Yeah, call in Sue or Scott and have them just give me audio and I'll put my headphones on for
that works. Yeah. So, like you're saying, you're more on the production end. Can you, kind of tell us some of the early lessons you learned? Because you're saying, there's a lot of, a lot more regulation now than there was back in the day. Can you kind of talk about that progression?
So it used to be that there was almost no regulation back during what was Prop 215. It was a medicinal era in California. So at that time, it was really up to independent companies and retailers to focus on what their personal regulations were. So it was pretty free. It was kind of Wild West as far as products go. Hence wanting to get into it and develop it into something that is more standardized and really consumer friendly. So now we have regulations from a plethora of different regulatory bodies, and really what it comes down to is food safe packaging as well as child resistant packaging, similar to how you would have anything for pharmaceuticals, including a lot of the regulations based around supply chain and how we transfer products. It's very similar to pharmaceuticals today.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't think of it that way, but yeah, I probably need child resistant stuff.
It's not necessarily for the benefit of the consumer. To make it legal, there was over-regulation, which we're all struggling with. It's pretty obvious in our industry right now, but it does look like there's some moves to change, and I think that's kind of what the responsibility of people like me in the industry is to participate in. Mm-hmm. But right now, for example, certain edibles can't be in clear packaging, so it kind of ruins the aesthetic of what you can offer. There's limitations to what ingredients you can use in an edible. So there's certain things that we have to deal with that are outside of regular pharmaceutical or outside of regular, consumer packaged goods that really put a burden on this packaging component and make it the primary driver for what the price is at right now.
So I got on that. So
welcome back.
Will, you said that you referenced, and I'm sorry, I'm coming a little bit late here, but the over-regulation in the industry and that is impacting pricing. So does it seem to you that pricing in cannabis packaging has a higher premium than in other industries like?
It does, for sure. And that goes across with everything that we use in our industry. If I purchase the same exact item that's marketed towards me in the cannabis industry, I will pay a premium as opposed to going outside of the cannabis supply chain, purchasing the exact same product, just not marketed to me. I pay a premium in cannabis for sure. And then part of the burden of overregulation is also the cost to us. A lot of what I do is design the compliance around packaging. Not just say the graphic component. And that compliance burden has a lot of points similar to food or vitamins. So getting all that together and actually getting, say, even something as simple as one joint to market from raw material, the compliance burden and the packaging burden is probably 75% of the cost to the consumer.
Yeah. That's funny that, there's this overregulation on something like this, whereas we were talking about in the Plastics and Clean Water conference that was a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how people can put like green or biodegradable, and like that's starting to get more regulation, but you can just slap that on there. But for something like this, you're being watched every step of the way.
Oh yeah, we can't tout any medicinal benefits, whether they're well known or not. Obviously, right now that's included in CBD, not just on THC cannabis products. The FDA is really clear on that. So a lot of the stuff that you see out there that's like CBD marketed to the mainstream that you could buy on like Amazon, so to speak, that realistically falls completely under, there's no compliance to it. And it's the regulatory bodies right now that are behind. So it's actually out of compliance and potentially would be something that would be stopped and incur a fine for that company. But the regulatory bodies, especially with COVID and being such a new industry and so much money on this end of it, they're really playing catch up on that.
Speaking of already getting off topic here, welcome to our world.
That's our style.
But speaking of the current pandemic and just current situation in the United States and California right now, how has the day-to-day changed for you?
In a few ways. One, we are essential considered here in California, as well as in a few other states. So we stayed open. Our production facility actually ramped up, and we were operating 7 days per week. But what really changed for us is on the supply chain with packaging, of course. So a lot of our stuff included, say, our Mylar bags that we get are printed and produced in China. So at the beginning of this COVID outbreak, we actually had trouble getting that finished, packaging here. Now, as China's opened up and we're slower here, the burden's actually on the retail market. It's changed the face of retail, I think, forever, especially in cannabis. People were able to continually consume and purchase their cannabis through this, but now they all of a sudden had to change how they were doing that. So I don't think it's ever going to go back, but mainly it was difficult getting all our supplies in the beginning. Now that's kind of cleared out. It's really just a California market being closed down now still.
Fascinating, because obviously I've seen a shift in like retail apparel and things like that. But now with the whole complication of regulatory, obviously a lot of retailers are going direct to consumer. But with cannabis, is that something that you can do in California and in other markets?
Yeah.
You can't. They're actually different licenses. Part of the recreational regulations now are that the supply chain is broken up. You have to have a different license for a cultivation facility versus a distribution, production, retail, and you can't necessarily own multiple licenses as the same company. So vertical integration is a little bit more expensive, and there's a burden to that. But right now, really what's happening is that it's being produced by one company, say, another company in the middle, such as Sonoma Pacific, where I work, will do the distribution, sales, manufacturing of that raw material, and then we send it downstream to a retailer who has to do that. There are companies that are vertically integrated and are moving into that, but that's kind of a larger umbrella. You're really not able to do it on a micro business level.
What about online sales?
Online sales are allowed to a certain extent. They are representations of a physical inventory in a physical location for a delivery service. But you can purchase through an app the same way you would DoorDash during COVID. You can get your weed that way too in California.
DoorDash, God bless. So you were talking about, your manufacturing facilities ramped up. What kind of, what were you're working 7 days a week now? What were kind of your numbers? What were your volumes beforehand?
Well, beforehand, I'll tell you, COVID was amazing, the switch of what consumers wanted. So it used to be that we were focusing on higher end products that were at a higher price point. And of course, now with everybody being stuck in on a limited budget, you might not want to give up your, alcohol consumption, your whatever that stress alleviator is, So now we've been focusing on higher volume, mid-tier, lower tier products with a very high focus on pre-rolls, joints. People are getting into smoking cannabis that haven't before, and there's a burden to, you don't want to go out and you don't want to buy a pipe, you don't want to buy a bong, you don't want to have to break that out when you want to consume. Sometimes the simple, like a pack of cigarettes, but something along those lines is much easier. So you can go in, you can just purchase, whatever flavor you want, whatever strength you want that looks nice. And that's really been our larger focuses of late, especially with COVID.
Cigarettes, you can purchase loosies, right? You can purchase single.
Absolutely, and mostly we do singles. That's actually what's more popular right now because of the price point of cannabis. The market trend right now is for smaller joints and packs and larger joints and singles. So, here we do everything from a tiny little quarter joint. We call them dog walkers. They're perfect for exactly that. Friend makers, another name for it, but we go all the way up to a 12 gram, novelty size party joint. So pretty much everything, every market.
So with that, that's a lot of packaging. So let's talk about the packaging volumes. Seasonal volumes of batches, crops, farms, what kind of material quantities are needed?
So an average pound of flour, if we're going to produce our normal joints, are 1 gram pre-rolls. That's your average joint, say. So for an average joint, that one tube, that plastic tube, weighs about 5 grams, and you're going to go through about 400 of them for every pound, say. So on average, we're looking about 2,000 grams of our plastic tubes for every pound of flower. Now, a typical crop for even a small farm, it would be for one greenhouse, 250 pounds, minimum. Our batches are 50 pounds. So going into large scale production, realistically, a 250-pound batch is going to require it's like 1,100 pounds worth of these plastic tubes if it's going into pre-rolls. And you got to imagine that a high consumer is going to go through, a half a dozen of these a week, say, one every, day or so. So it really starts to add up because we don't have that downstream recycling or reuse that other industries might because we're so new. There's no regulation as far as requiring a retailer or a company to use a certain amount of eco-friendly packaging or deal with what the results of that are downstream. So it's very high use, especially for pre-rolls. And there's really no reuse or recycling set up as of right now, not in California at least.
And what's really exciting about this to me is that this is, a lot of the farms, a lot of the distribution companies are based in California, right? And California is probably also the epicenter of sustainability within the United States, I would say, in some respects, at least in the plastic industry, right? So, are these pre-roll containers the new plastic straw? We've seen a lot of these presentations today and this afternoon focus on sustainability, right? Which points to this, disparity between the product and the packaging and the consciousness probably of the market as well, that the consumers that you're selling to want to maintain some kind of eco-consciousness, right? So what's happening in terms of sustainability now?
Oh, well, absolutely. There's a few products out there because we're a newer industry with these quick changing requirements that have developed every 6 months or so. It really is difficult for a packaging manufacturer, say, to keep up with. As of right now, there's a couple companies that provide some options. There's Sana, which provides a reused ocean plastic tube, which for our own brand, we do for all our pre-rolls. It's a very nice reusable plastic tube. So part of it is that now that becomes part of the product. It's no longer just the packaging. Right. You get to reuse it. It's really nice. They come from ocean plastic. They also make a biodegradable hemp version. But we've really liked them because they also help with product integrity. They produced a much better tube. They keep the product fresh. They're reusable. I wish there was more use of that in our industry. That higher price point, unfortunately, people don't want. These pre-rolls are considered disposable. So I would say it is the new plastic straw, at least in our industry. And there's a huge conflict, exactly as you mentioned. In California, we're very eco-friendly as far as the greater populace is concerned. But in cannabis, we are an incredibly resource-heavy industry. That's not just with our packaging. It also goes to our use of fertilizers in the cultivation side, and then our use of power. Cultivation in California requires a lot of electricity to the point where we're actually a significant percentage of California's total power consumption just for indoor flower production. So as techniques and technology progresses and we're able to become more efficient in those processes, including the packaging side and production side before that, we'll be able to better address that. But as of right now, the regulatory concerns and lack of options have really put us in a position where we really don't have a choice but to offer some things that maybe we wouldn't want to long term.
Right. I think that's a general issue with a lot of sustainability, in not just cannabis, in almost every consumer good, food good, whatever. You want it to be the reusable option, you want it to be the sustainable option, but the price point just isn't there yet. And so you have to make that conscious, do I want to do this or do I want to keep it cheap? And until these two get a little bit closer, I don't think we're going to make the full switch over.
And they are getting closer, every few months, as we reapproach an issue or as we redevelop a product, there's a few more options out. Every time I try something new, there's some new formats available. But for right now, it's really limiting.
of questions from the audience. I see on the Sonoma Pack website, it states that you're using ocean plastic containers for your pre-rolled tubes. Can you comment on what specific chemistry you're using? That's something maybe Sana could respond to later.
Yeah, Sana's going to be talking later on that. I can't really speak to that, unfortunately. I can tell you anything you want on cannabis, but so much.
And then there was also a question from Professor Manju Misra, biodegradable hemp version. What does that mean? Ocean plastics are not biodegradable, though. Yeah, there are two different types of packaging. It's just two different versions that the same company offers. It's in my opinion, the best and most sustainable option for pre-rolls right now. The hemp version, as much as it's very popular, that's been more popular on the mainstream CBD. So you buy your hemp joints in a hemp tube. But we really liked the ocean plastic message. We are Sonoma Pacific. We are coastal. It made a lot more sense for us. I also really like the white finish of the tube. It looks really nice labeled, and anything we can do to help pull the plastic out as opposed to create something else, right, I think was kind of what we were focused on. Absolutely. We see this whole plastic-free movement, and some of these people saying, stop using plastics. But my answer to that, is always, or retort to that is always, we have to stop abusing plastics, right? If we stop using them, they're not going to go away. They're still going to stay there, right? So what is the industry? What are you doing? What is your competitors doing to achieve a more sustainable supply chain process, more sustainable packaging? What's the next step for Sonoma Pack? If you can reveal, kind of what's on your mind. Yeah. Well, for us, our own packaging is moving to be all sustainable. So beyond just our tubes, Sana's also manufactured lids for jars for our even premium eighths. So we're going to move to that by the end of the year, including post-consumer glass for our jars, which is great. I think beyond that, it's just organizing reuse and recycling programs at the retail level. And that is definitely something that we're interested in approaching more as COVID kind of ends and we can do that. As of right now, people take it and consume at home, so it's really difficult, which is why we're pushing for something more sustainable from our end until we can approach it from the other end as soon as COVID's kind of wrapped up a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah, all hopeful there.
In terms of, you mentioned having to keep up with changing regulations, and this was actually a question that I had initially typed to ask you, but deleted it. What resources do you use? How are you able to stay on top of all the changing regulations?
So that's actually kind of difficult. They put out bulletins from every regulatory body, but some of it is as I approach a hurdle or a process, again, all of a sudden my contact with that regulatory body will be completely different. So a lot of it is unfortunately not easy information to find. It takes a lot of reading, a lot of regular research and staying up to date on it, and often having to correct mistakes after the fact with packaging. That's been a case for even some of the largest brands that I've dealt with in the last year. It's almost an inevitability over time that we will have to relabel, repackage in some capacity.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. The list of compliance points we go for, say for one pre-roll, just for example, it's a list of over 30 compliance points for the packaging. So when you have to work those in with your nice packaging design and a sustainable effort, it really becomes burdensome. I would love if everything that we put out was 100% biodegradable right from the start, and we could go into that. It's absolutely not possible, no matter how, even if I didn't care about the margin and I had everything behind me in support, it would be impossible for me to find a format that completes all of my requirements downstream that is also sustainable.
Yeah, and even just the repetition of packaging or the relabeling or anything like that, you're taking away from any sustainability you have each time you're changing it, rerunning it, reprinting it,
Absolutely. So. What we can do, though, is we focused on being more sustainable and better in our production practices. So at our facility versus others, there's definitely more units to market. We have a much higher yield, a much less overpack compared to everything else. So while we haven't been able to focus on these outward sustainability projects as much because we're limited, we've focused inwardly and we've gotten really, really efficient. We're really tight as far as how much we use internally We don't purchase any extra. I'm really careful about where we destroy products and how that goes out, which is also another burden in this industry, of course. So we've definitely tried our best through other avenues to be sustainable.
Yeah, that's a good approach. All right. So we are going to wrap up here. We're going to send everybody into the next room. Apparently there'll be a link. You just click. I don't know. I haven't done it, but I'm sure it'll be easy. So, Will, we just want to thank you so much for coming on today, sharing your perspective, and especially in the cannabis industry. It's really appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Will. If you've got a question, the voices resonate. Ooh, PlastChicks.
Okay.